What's up guys, Lvladen here, and today I'm coming at you with a video on the 11.2 live realms. So it is now the end of week 2 of the season, and I figured I would update everyone with the 3 best Ret Paladin builds I found, along with my plans for the 2 and the 4 sets and updates regarding the bugs in the class. So to start us off, I'm going to talk a little bit about the first build here, which is the build you would most likely see people running if the check PvP, the Murloc IOs, if the APIs of the world were actually working correctly right now. Currently, if you Warcraft Armory people, sometimes, I think most of the time, the talents are missing. So this is typically what you would see the meta build for Paladins. This is Herald of the Sun with Radiant Glory and Crusade. Now this build would be very familiar if you played Season 2 or even a little bit of Season 1. And the main upsides to this build here are allowing you to get faster cast Repentances off because of the haste from Crusade, along with very high consistent damage. The downside of this build is it's a little bit less bursty than either the 1 Minute Wings Avenging Wrath Might equivalent or even the Radiant Glory Avenging Wrath Might equivalent. Now, one little key point that you would notice here is if you're playing Crusade, you're most likely not going to take Rush of Light. You don't have too much crit, at least early on in the season. This changes a little bit when you get the 4 set, but for the most part, if you're going to play this build, this is the most meta standard build that exists for Ret Paladin at the moment. Now, on a side note, this is actually not the build that I typically play. I like and prefer the Avenging Wrath equivalent of this build or the 1 Minute Wings version of this build. Now, the main difference between these two builds is that you would take Rush of Light here for a little bit more haste because you have more crit uptime with Herald of the Sun. You're just going to be critting a little bit more often. And then this actually has really good synergy with Blessing of Anshi and Luminosity right here. So the crit chance of Hammer of Wrath and Divine Storm is increased by 10%. We also get in PvP combat 15% crit from Avenging Wrath. And then even though it really does not do too much damage, your crits on Hammer of Wrath also throw out a little tiny dot from Sunseer, which actually I did test. Sunseer can also proc Blessing of Anshi, and you have a chance for Second Sunrise. So I really do like this build here. There is a chance where, you get your Blessing of Anshi, and it's in a Vengeful Wrath execute range, and it throws a Second Sunrise Hammer, and these all crit. You're gonna hit someone if they're below like 35% and it crits. You're gonna hit them for like 4.5 million, depending on your gear. But just off of one lucky Blessing of Anshi crit in execute range. That really does have the finishing power that Hammer of Wrath has kind of lacked for quite some time. So that's why I really like this build right here. I also don't typically play the no cooldown Repentance, which if you do play Crusade right here, the Crusade variant of this build, you are more than likely to take the no cooldown Repentance build because you're going to be spamming Repentances during your high haste value on your wings. Personally right here, this build is really good. I think this is actually a good time to segue into talking about the set bonuses before I switch to the third or the second build and the third build, which are Templar and the 1 Minute Wings variants. So just to briefly touch on the set bonuses here, and I'm going through Ghostlands right now for nostalgia's sake since Midnight was announced and this whole area is going to get redone, which is really cool, one of my favorite areas. But back to being on point here. So I currently have my 4 set on week 2, which is pretty crazy. I got super lucky in the vault. I got my helm from the vault, and then I upgraded it with Astral Lacquer or Varnish, whatever the Conquest equivalent one was for that. So I spent like 875 Conquest points on this. I got my shoulders, and then I converted I converted World Quest legs to PvE set bonus gear, and then I got the lowest item level possible gloves from my vault. on week 2. So I got really lucky. I did kind of grind for it because I did a ton of delves, ton of dungeons, but we did manage to get that setup right here. What is going on here? Okay, got some guardians out there. Pretty cool, pretty cool. Anyways, so for those of you wondering about the bugs, unfortunately, the bug for the 2-set effect, which basically, if you don't have this macro, which I'll go over in one moment, your Solar Wrath will cancel your following Sun's Avatar if you proc a Radiant Glory Wings and then you cast Wake of Ashes during that Solar Wrath. Now, if you get a proc of Wings at the end of your Wake of Ashes during that Solar Wrath, it can also cancel it that way, in which case the macro does not help you. But for the most cases, this macro that I'm about to show you helps you maintain your Solar Wrath effect and your Sun's Avatar. If that wasn't really clear, all you guys really have to worry about is just using this macro here. So this macro is just, and I'll paste it in the description in case you can't read it, it's just cancel Aura Solar Wrath / cast Wake of Ashes. And that fixes one of the 2 bugs with the set bonus. Unfortunately, it's still active. Now, some of you may wonder, in PvP combat, does the 4-set actually grant you an additional Dawn Light? Because if I get into PvP combat, the tooltips on the set bonuses change if it's in instance combat, and then it says it grants you 0 Dawn Lights. The question, or the answer to your question is yes, it does in fact grant you a Dawn Light like normal. The only nerf portion of this is the increase to your Holy Power spenders. That is, I believe, 4%, if I remember correctly. So it is worth taking the 4-set from your for Herald of the Sun, no matter what build you play. In addition to that, the way that the Dawn Light gets granted is at the expiration of your wings. So whether you're playing the 1-minute wings build or any of the Radiant Glory variants, whether it's the Wake of Ashes wings proc or the actual proc of Radiant Glory here, you get that extra Dawn Light at the end. At the very beginning, not at the end. The very beginning of Solar Wrath and the very end of your wings. If that's confusing, Solar Wrath is our 2-set effect. So the second that 2-set effect is active, you gain your charge of Dawn Light. So it's definitely worth running in PvP if you have the ability to do so. Now I'm going to talk about the 1-minute Wings Herald build here. This is a good transition point. So the next most viable build here, which I think is the highest overall damage version of Ret at the moment, is the 1-minute Wings Herald build with double DBS trinkets. Now, it's definitely less popular than the Radiant Glory variant, but with this effect here, you actually gain 2 Dawn Lights. And even though it looks like it's nerfed in PvP, it's a 0 or whatever, you gain 2 effects from the Sun's Avatar, or the Solar Wrath effect. Now it's also the full duration, so you get 10 extra seconds of Sun's Avatar as well, which unsure if it's supposed to be 10 or 5 seconds. I don't really know exactly if it's not nerfed in PvP correctly, but the way that this functions is that upon expiration of your 1-minute Wings build, your Avenging Wrath Might, you gain another 2 charges of Dawn Light on your player character to use just as if you would cast a Wake of Ashes and then get your 2 charges of Dawn Light that way. So in regards to Dawn Light uptime, now we have just as much Dawn Light uptime with the 1-minute Wings build that we do with Radiant Glory, which makes this build all the better in Season 3 of The War Within. That's because Gleaming Rays right here is essentially always active when you're playing the Radiant Glory build, but if you stack up enough Dawn Lights on the target and you're not hitting into a Death Knight's AMS, Anti-Magic Shell or whatever, immuning them or into other various immunities, you can have really high uptime on Gleaming Rays as well, which boosts your damage outside of your Avenging Wrath and in your Avenging Wrath windows, but like especially when your wings goes away, you have less damage than you would consistently playing the Radiant Glory build. That's not so much a problem anymore. Now, the thing that you do have to worry about with the 1 minute wings build is target distance. Now, the only way, there's two ways that you can lose out on damage from Sun's Avatar right now. The first way is if a target line of sights you and they're still within 40 yards, that means that Sun's Avatar is going to stay connected to the target, but the second they're out of line of sight, it no longer is dealing damage even though it looks like it's still connected to the target. If you get back in range, the damage restarts. The second way that you lose out on damage of Sun's Avatar is if a target goes further than 40 yards away from you. That permanently breaks the Sun's Avatar application window for wings. This is less of a problem for the Radiant Glory variant because you have so many more proc wings that are reconnecting that window for your Sun's Avatars. So you deal higher damage with Avenging Wrath, but it has the drawback of if a target gets away from you and breaks that Sun's Avatar, you can't just like necessarily reapply it. The upside of this is with that force set effect, that doesn't suffer from the reapplication process that Avenging Wrath Might does. So you get a whole nother window to reapply a Sun's Avatar after the expiration of your 1 minute wings, making this build significantly better the second that you get the force set in all aspects. Consistent damage and, you know, less clunky because you have to worry about the Sun's Avatar beam connecting less. All right, that brings me to our next build, which I'm sure a lot of you are excited for, which is Templar here. All right, so the first thing that you'll see here is that with Templar, I'm pretty certain that Templar is only going to be superior or equal to Herald after you get the force set. I did a ton of testing with the force set in PvP, even with the lower item level tier gear, and Templar did feel very solid. The main downsides was the same downsides that we had with Templar in Season 1, which were caster cleaves and classes that can CC and kite you during your Hammer of Light windows. Hammer of Light windows are extended to be 20 seconds long now, up from 12 seconds in previous seasons. And Hammer of Light definitely can crank. I've seen as high as 7 million crits in PvP. That's really, really high right now. Your average Hammer of Light will probably be about 4 million, which is a decent number. But if you do double stack Blessing of Dawn, there are a ton of modifiers for this spell. You can get really lucky on a crit with all your cooldowns and two stacks of Blessing of Dawn and hit someone for like 7 million. It's crazy. It's really nice. All right, so now we're talking about the build itself here. You'll notice that even though I'm taking Avenging Wrath Might for my Radiant Glory, I'm not actually taking Rush of Light. And that's because with this build, you're definitely getting off less Hammer of Light, less Final Verdicts because of Hammer of Light itself. Hammer of Light costs 5 Holy Power. You now get 2 charges with the force set bonus. And that makes it so that you're spending a lot of your Holy Power resources on actually getting these Hammer of Lights off. There is one bug that I found with the force set. So if I let me just get Holy Power here, and I'll go Hammer of Light some poor creature. You'll notice that I have 2 charges of Hammer of Light, and I have a buff that's ticking down from 20 seconds. With that buff right here, if you get your, where's it here? Your Light's Deliverance stacks to 50, you also get a buff that allows you to cast a free Hammer of Light. If you use Wake of Ashes and you have that buff expiring, for some reason, if you don't use it within 12 seconds, this Light's Deliverance Hammer of Light incurs a cost. So you have 3 charges of Hammer of Light available to use, but all of a sudden now all 3 of them will cost Holy Power, as opposed to 2 of them costing Holy Power and 1 of them being free. However, you can also get lucky and proc Divine Purposes off of Hammer of Lights, which is why I'm running Divine Purpose with this build. And more than likely, you're never holding a Hammer of Light for more than 12 seconds. In very rare cases you are, but mostly you're never holding it for 12 seconds. So even if this bug does not get fixed, you are unlikely to encounter it unless you are you know, in a BG, you just killed someone, you just got your 50 stacks, and now you have to go wait and fight in some other combat to get that. Now, the question is this in PvE? Because if this is in PvE as well, then it's more likely to get fixed. And I think it does, to me, it does sound like a PvE bug as well. Yeah, that's it for Templar right here. I don't play Burnt to Ash. The last time I tested Burnt to Ash, it still wasn't fixed. In previous patches, this modified your Empyrean Hammers to deal 30% additional damage to Truce Wave targets. It has really good synergy with crit, but unfortunately right now, this is actually not applying to your Empyrean Hammers unless it was invisible hotfixed on Friday, because the last day I tested it was this past Thursday with no luck there. All right, so there you have it. The 3 top ret builds, all 3 of them are viable. The only thing that I would say is that if you are playing Templar, don't expect it to be feeling super amazing until you get your 4 set. I did actually play Templar to 2400 in solo shuffle before I got my 4 set, so it is possible, but it's a little bit more difficult than either playing, you know, one or the other Herald variants. And then both Herald variants are very, very solid as well. I'll link all the builds in the comments below. I'm also going to be talking about all the midnight news fairly soon. And I guess one more thing I'll touch upon is why I have my gloves over my chest piece right here. So I'm either going to get a Verse Haste chest or a Verse Mastery chest. I haven't decided yet, depending on how much I have after I get my my neck and my what's it called, ring here. But basically the reason is the more crit that you have, the more burst you're going to do. Critting is really important as Templar, and crit has very good synergy with Herald. If I took the chest piece, which is like something like, I don't know, in PvP combat, we're gonna have like 2,000 something haste from it. Maybe that's it. Maybe a little less. Maybe it was like 1700. I don't quite remember off the top of my head what the 723 item level haste value is at. But you would gain more haste off of consistent Rush of Light uptime while having more crit value, while also having the ability to have more versatility than if you ran the set piece chest and then like a conquest or crafted Verse Mastery gloves. So that's why I'm running this build here as opposed to taking the chest set piece. Now it's going to be very, very close, and ultimately it's going to be preference to the player. I don't think you can really go wrong with one build or the other. It's not going to make that significant of a difference. But that's my reasoning as to why I'm running the gloves instead of the chest piece right here. Plus I got it out of my vault, but this is what I would have done anyway, regardless of what 4 set values I was going to be, or what four set pieces I was going to be using in the future. All right, now that's about it for the builds here. Make sure you guys drop a thumbs up if you enjoyed, and let me know in the comments what builds you're running. And then also the description will have these 3 builds here. All right, I'll see you all next time. Peace.